The storm around Caitlin Clark didn't start with a play or a foul or a headline about her latest record-breaking night. It began with a whisper, something small, something quiet, something that spread through the league like smoke before anyone realized there was a fire. By the time the rumors reached social media, it was already too late. The story had escaped. Insiders were calling it Project B, a mysterious off-season deal that had the WNBA on edge. No one knew where it came from, but everyone knew who it was about. Caitlin Clark, the name that had defined an entire season. The rookie who had become the league's heartbeat, its controversy, its cash cow, and its storm, all at once. At first, no one believed it. The idea that Caitlin had signed an independent deal worth more than some players' entire contracts sounded like gossip. Too wild to be real. But then came the leaks. Screenshots. Emails. A press release draft that someone inside a corporate PR office accidentally sent out early. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Caitlin Clark was set to headline a high-profile event in New York. One appearance. One night. Over $100,000. The reaction was instant. The WNBA didn't just flinch, it panicked. In boardrooms, executives scrambled. They weren't worried about the money itself, they were worried about what it represented. For decades, the WNBA had built its structure around control. Salary caps, sponsorship approvals, uniform marketing messages. Every player had a lane, and no one was supposed to veer out of it. But Caitlin Clark wasn't in the lane anymore. She was driving her own road, full speed ahead, and the league didn't know how to stop her. The leak exposed something no one wanted to say out loud. Caitlin Clark didn't need the WNBA to stay relevant. The WNBA needed her. That thought alone sent shockwaves through the organization. It wasn't supposed to be like this. One player, especially a rookie, was never supposed to have this much leverage. But Caitlin Clark had never been just another player. From the moment she stepped into the league, everything changed. Attendance spiked. Ratings skyrocketed. Merch sales doubled. And every highlight that featured her face became viral gold. Caitlin Clark had turned women's basketball from a niche sport into a national conversation. She wasn't just the WNBA's biggest star, she was its brand. And that, right there, was the problem. Because when that kind of power gets concentrated into one person's hands, institutions start to break. Inside the WNBA's Manhattan headquarters, the energy was tense. Calls were made to sponsors. Meetings were moved up. Executives whispered about the optics problem. They weren't mad that Caitlin Clark was making money, they were mad she was doing it without them. Every dollar she earned outside of the WNBA made the league look small. And for an organization trying to project unity and empowerment, that kind of independence was a nightmare. Meanwhile, the fans didn't care about optics. They cared about one thing. Caitlin Clark was winning. She was outsmarting the system that had underpaid and undervalued women athletes for years. Social media turned her into a symbol of modern empowerment, someone who refused to wait for permission. But inside locker rooms, the reaction wasn't so simple. Some veterans were quietly frustrated. They had played overseas for years, grinding in empty gyms, just to make what Caitlin made in a single appearance. They respected her, yes, but they also saw what her rise meant for them. It wasn't just a new era. It was a new hierarchy. Reporters started asking tough questions. Was Caitlin Clark's dominance good for the league, or was it breaking it apart from the inside? By now, the term Project B was trending. It wasn't just about the contract, it was about the shift. Fans were calling it the beginning of the brand era, where athletes became bigger than the organizations they played for. Caitlin wasn't just endorsing brands, she was one. And as she stayed silent through it all, her silence became its own message. She didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't justify. That silence was her armor. Every hour she said nothing, the speculation grew louder, and her power multiplied. Because when you control your voice, you control the story. For the WNBA, this silence was torture. They had built their season around her image. Her name was on the billboards, her jersey in every arena. They couldn't afford to alienate her, but they also couldn't let her be untouchable. It was a balancing act that no one could keep steady. Behind closed doors, Insiders claimed that some executives even considered introducing new rules, off-season disclosure requirements, contract reporting guidelines, maybe even a Caitlin clause to prevent independent deals from overshadowing league partnerships. But every idea they floated sounded worse than the last. If they went after her, they'd look jealous. If they stayed quiet, they'd look weak. Either way, Caitlin Clark had already won. And then came October 29th, the day of her appearance. The Project B event that had the entire sports world watching. Outside the venue in New York, fans lined the sidewalks, chanting her name like it was game night. Photographers crowded the red carpet as if it were the Oscars. When Caitlin Clark finally stepped on stage, she wasn't wearing a jersey or holding a basketball. She was wearing power, confidence, freedom. Her speech wasn't about basketball, it was about leadership, focus, and finding your voice in a world that constantly tries to define you. But beneath those words, everyone knew what it really meant. She wasn't just talking about growth. She was talking about evolution, about changing the system from the inside out. When the event ended, the crowd stood and cheered. A standing ovation that lasted minutes. Cameras flashed. Clips went viral within hours. And as the world watched Caitlin Clark walk off that stage, one truth became impossible to ignore. She wasn't just playing in the WNBA anymore. She was redefining it. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Caitlin Clark breaks the mold. The future of women's sports has arrived. Even networks that rarely covered the WNBA were now leading with her story. What had started as a rumor had become a movement. But inside the league office, the mood was far from celebratory. The event had been a success, yes, but it also set a precedent that terrified the higher-ups. Because now, every player in the league had seen what was possible. Every rookie, every veteran, every star in the making realized they didn't have to wait for the league to validate them. They could build their own empires. Caitlin Clark had just drawn the blueprint. And that scared the people in charge more than anything. Because for years, the WNBA's biggest struggle wasn't talent, it was attention. They wanted fans to love the league. But Caitlin had made fans love her. The brand had shifted from collective to individual, and there was no going back. Sponsors noticed too. Companies that once negotiated through league channels started going directly to players. They wanted Caitlin's influence, her following, her reach. She was now the face of women's sports, and everyone wanted a piece. The WNBA, for all its authority, was no longer leading the conversation. It was following it. Behind the scenes, tensions deepened. A few anonymous players told reporters that they felt overshadowed. "It's like everything is about Caitlin now," one said. "We're all playing the same game, but it feels like she's in her own league." They weren't wrong. Caitlin Clark had become bigger than the league she played in. And that's what made her story so divisive. To some, she was a hero, proof that women could command the same cultural power as men. To others, she was a disruptor, someone unintentionally exposing how unbalanced the system really was. The irony? The WNBA had wanted a star to draw attention. Now they had one who drew so much attention, she made the league itself seem secondary. And yet, Caitlin never asked for any of it. She never demanded special treatment, never boasted about her success. Her power came from consistency, from showing up, performing, and letting the results speak louder than any statement could. Her leaked contract didn't ruin the WNBA. It revealed it. It showed how much potential women's basketball had when the players were finally allowed to be themselves. And the truth was undeniable. Caitlin Clark wasn't breaking the system. She was proving it could be rebuilt. Over the weeks that followed, the panic inside the league started to fade, replaced by a quiet realization. The WNBA could either fight her influence or learn from it. Because Caitlin had already done something the league had been trying to do for years: make people care. Her every move was news. Her games were events. Her brand was global. And for the first time, young girls across the country weren't just dreaming of playing in the WNBA, they were dreaming of being Caitlin Clark. The power dynamic had changed forever. The league didn't own the narrative anymore. The players did. And as for Caitlin, she never needed to say, "I told you so." Her success spoke for itself. That's the brilliance of her story. She didn't just sign a contract. She signed a declaration that women athletes could control their image, their worth, and their destiny, without asking for permission. The WNBA will adapt. Has to. Because Caitlin Clark has already rewritten the rules. She isn't just a player in this league anymore. She's the standard, the benchmark, the blueprint. And the message is clear. You can't contain what was built to lead. The league may still be catching its breath, but the truth is already echoing through every arena, every broadcast, every fan conversation. The WNBA doesn't define Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark defines the WNBA. And the story of Project B? It wasn't a scandal. It was a warning. A signal that the era of control is ending, and the era of player power has officially begun. Because once a player realizes she doesn't need the system to succeed, the system will never be the same again.